Garrett, I did want to talk a little bit more about what we're going to expect this afternoon. So we expect to hear from a Dr. Harper. Now, Dr. Harper has evaluated Sarah Boone previously. This was a big part of the conversation a few months ago when James Owens had first taken on Sarah Boone's case, when he was talking about how they wanted Dr. Harper to interview Sarah Boone so that they could use this battered spouse defense. So that's going to be a pretty big witness that we hear from this afternoon before the defense says they could rest their case.
Stephanie, I thought it was interesting to also hear from that psychologist this morning, talking a lot about the kind of ins and outs and kind of laying that foundation for jurors of what the battered spouse syndrome is and kind of how it can manifest itself and show itself. I would anticipate that that was probably an important kind of foundational layer for the defense to kind of have that expert before we ever hear from this Dr. Harper, who we're going to hear from this afternoon.
Yes, and I think that is strategic because they wanted the jury to understand what that battered spouse syndrome is before Dr. Harper goes on the stand and talks about it in relation to Sarah Boone and how they're going to say she suffers from this. So they wanted to put the lay of the land out there, explain what this is so jurors can understand that before they go into how Sarah Boone could be suffering from this.
I also thought it was interesting to hear the prosecution with their cross-examination of that same forensic psychologist and asking a lot of questions about kind of other disorders. He brought up narcissistic personality disorder. He brought up adjustment disorder. He brought up the credibility issues.
Brought up again later by Kevin Beck. Yeah.
Yeah, go into that because I think the prosecution was making a little bit of a point there in that that you can't necessarily take everything that Sarah Boone was saying at face value.
Yeah, and that's the first time we had heard about that. We had, of course, heard about the battered spouse syndrome before, but we hadn't heard about that, the narcissistic disorder and adjustment disorder, which is, they talked about a person's reaction to a situation that occurs. So because they asked this forensic psychologist all of these questions, you have to think that this is going to come up later with maybe Dr. Harper or another expert.
We also heard the prosecution saying, or making the point, making the forensic psychologist kind of go into this and make the point that it does not necessarily have to be a man kind of initiating this cycle of violence and that kind of thing. And I think that goes to the point that Susan was making a minute ago about the relationship between Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres. So kind of interesting to see the prosecution try to muddy up the finger pointing a little bit when it comes to the relationship between the two.
But then they ended the day before the lunch break, or the afternoon, showing that video of Jorge Torres beating up Sarah Boone's TV. And we heard a little bit about this yesterday in Sarah Boone's testimony. So she had talked about this baseball bat, and this is the same baseball bat that she said that she hit Jorge Torres with while he was inside the suitcase. She was very animated and showing that she was like how she was hitting him while he was inside the suitcase with that baseball bat. She said that that is her son's baseball bat and that he had broken her TV before. They showed screenshots from that video yesterday, but today we saw that video in full. And I'm just looking at my phone quickly to pull up a quote from Sarah Boone because she was talking about this baseball bat yesterday and how she had been threatened before from Jorge Torres with this baseball bat. And he had previously told her, she says, he was going to break my face with the bat and I would be unrecognizable to my son. And again, that was the same baseball bat that she then hit him with the night that he died, the night that he was zipped in the suitcase, and she did not let him out.
And Stephanie, we've got some of that video of the baseball bat George using to smash the TV. We've got that playing alongside you right now.
You really see him just smashing that TV many times, and it's a short video, but you can see him smashing the TV, and it kind of shows this picture of Jorge Torres that Sarah Boone had been talking about, that he drinks and he gets violent.
I thought it was interesting too that, you know, there was audio on that video, but we didn't hear Sarah Boone say a thing during either one of those.
I'm sorry, Garrett, can you repeat yourself? It seems
Sure.
like the phone cut out a little.
Yeah, I was saying those videos, those videos that we just saw from the cell phone of George hitting the TV with the baseball bat. There's audio on it. There's clearly audio on it. We hear him say things. We hear the impact of but Sarah Boone does not say a word during those videos.
No, and in her testimony yesterday, she said, I believe if I'm remembering correctly, she said that he asked her to take those videos. I don't think I wrote down exactly what he said in the video, but I remember her saying that in her testimony yesterday, that he had asked her to take the videos. And then later she took a picture, I believe, of him. I'm not sure if it was a picture or a video, but it was definitely Jorge Torres then sitting on the couch, kind of slouched over, holding the bat. And she said that that was at that time he was drunk and passed out on the couch after smashing the TV.
I want to ask you for a minute about something that happened yesterday afternoon after we talked at lunch yesterday, and that would have been the more of the cross-examination of Sarah Boone with her being on the stand, and the suitcase demonstration where she had to get down and zip up the suitcase. And I was just wondering if you were able to tell at all, I know you talked about it a little bit with Susan, but some of the jury's reaction to some of those things that we saw late in the afternoon yesterday.
Yeah, I think the same as before. They were just pretty focused and just watching intensely. And you could tell that this jury really cares about taking in all of this information. Also, just to talk about that moment, so Sarah Boone was taken out of the box where she was testifying. She was taken out and brought to where the assistant state attorney had brought the suitcase. And he had asked Sarah Boone to zip up that suitcase, put the zippers exactly to where Jorge Torres was, and showed everybody where he was positioned in the suitcase. Number one, James Owens first stopped her from touching the suitcase and asked to get her gloves. And then number two, they had also mentioned that the pull tabs, and if you've been watching the coverage, you may know what I'm talking about, but just to explain it again, think of a zipper. You have that little thing on the bottom of it, whether it's plastic or it's whatever it may be, where you can pull a zipper to open something. Well, those had been missing on this suitcase that George was zipped in. There was a pink paper clip that they used to pull the zipper. Yesterday, when we were walking out the courtroom before we spoke yesterday, I was talking about how they were looking at the suitcase. Well, James Owens had got the suitcase out of the evidence box and shook that box, and it seemed like they were looking for something. So now back to this moment that Sarah is testifying, and the assistant state attorney is asking her to show where the zippers are. They said that that pink little piece of the paper clip was missing. And they said that that was what made it easier to move the zipper around. So yesterday, Sarah Boone had audibly said, oh, well, this wasn't that hard yesterday when she was trying to move the zippers. But she eventually did. She showed where those zippers were, and she also showed how Jorge Torres was positioned inside the suitcase. But I did think that that part was kind of interesting.
And I agree, and I also think it was interesting just some of the interactions between the prosecutor and Sarah Boone during that cross-examination, because there was a number of times where Sarah Boone tried to dodge the question a little bit, tried to make it more difficult on the prosecutor, tried to act like she didn't necessarily know what he was referring to. At one point, Will J. specifically said, ma'am, you know exactly what I'm talking about, something along those lines. So you almost saw a little bit of the kind of the cat and mouse game of prosecutor versus defendant. right there on the stand.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what happens when you take the stand. You agree to answer all questions. You could, of course, tell that Sarah Boone was more comfortable when she was talking with her attorney, when her attorney was questioning her, and then less comfortable when the assistant state attorney was asking his questions and having her come out of the box and different things like that.
Yeah, and so the defense, it sounds like, as you said, is kind of nearing the end of its case here. So just kind of talk us through where things are headed this afternoon.
Yeah, so like I said, on the elevator ride down to walk outside to talk with you, I was in the elevator with James Owens, and he said that they believe they will rest their case today. They have Miss Walker, which is, I believe, another doctor, coming in at 1 p.m., so that's why we're in lunch break till about 12:50, and then Dr. Harper will be here this afternoon, and Dr. Harper is the one, like I said, who had evaluated Sarah Boone, and she had been on a different case, so they thought she wasn't going to get here till tomorrow, but she got here late last night, and she'll be taking the stand today. And then I think shortly after that, they said that it will be the end. So they will rest their case after that. So we'll see when we go back upstairs. I know I could kind of hear chatter between attorneys about if they have any more videos or any more evidence that, they missed or haven't shown yet. So I'm sure that they'll do all of that during this long lunch break, as well as Attorney James Owens speaking with Dr. Harper before she testifies.
Any indication from the prosecution about their rebuttal case? I know they had said, I believe it may have been yesterday in one of the exchanges before the jury was in the room, talking about them having a couple expert witnesses of themselves that they wanted to call as part of their rebuttal case before closing arguments.
Sorry, Garrett. Can you repeat one more time? I don't know why it cut out again.
Yeah, no problem. I was just saying, do you have any indication about the prosecution's rebuttal case? I know at one point, I believe yesterday, they had said something to the judge about having a couple expert witnesses of themselves to call in response to the experts that the defense is calling. I didn't know if you had any more insight into that and to what we can expect once the defense rests its case.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure, and I don't want to speculate, but I was wondering if Brian Boone was going to come back on the stand. I don't think he was released after he was done speaking to maybe talk about Sarah Boone herself. I know they were talking about this narcissistic personality or disorder, so that was maybe someone that I thought they could potentially bring back as a witness, but we will have to, of course, wait and see.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see. Things have been certainly moving along, and we get ready for what I'm sure will be another action-packed afternoon in court. So, Stephanie, before we let you go, is there anything else you want to add that we haven't touched on here?
Kind of just what you were mentioning just now, that things are moving quickly, because these jurors were told that they had to be available until November 1st. That was part of the reason why they had 8 alternates, which is pretty unusual for a trial, but it was because that this was expected to take so long. However, we're seeing things move along and move very quickly. It's Wednesday, and they were thinking that this would go until next Friday. So like you said, things are kind of moving quickly, moving along, and we'll see what happens this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem beyond the realm of possibility that this case could be in the jury's hands on this Friday.
Could be. It could be. I think one of the attorneys kind of hinted at that. So, moving pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Fox 35's Stephanie Buffamonte, we will let you take a little bit of a break here before court comes back. We appreciate you joining us every afternoon here, and all your insights and observations. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Garrett.